That's Frank Stewart, my godfather. And Frank Chorman.
Another
The
godfather.
animal.
The
animal.
That's true.
Yeah, Frank. A lot of water under the bridge.
What would you like to know, Tony?
Whatever you guys wanna. You know, this is we're not running.
Well, we can go back 70 years, we go back 50 years, 40 years.
Not going for Super
But
10 years.
I can only get back 56 years now. I haven't got into the ancients yet. You know? I'm still an antique, but not that old, okay?
Well, right now I'm doing a new show called It Feels So Good to Be Alive. You've heard of it, Tony.
Oh, yeah.
The title sounds good.
And To Be Alive would be a good show.
All right.
We have some nice stars for it, which I can't name at the present time because they're not under contract.
All right.
And we're out raising the money for it right now, as you know.
Yeah. Well, Frank, they don't have theaters like they used to.
No, the old houses are gone, Tony.
Yeah.
Right here in Staten Island, there was 14 theaters at one time.
How many got left now?
Well, they're so modern. There's 10 in one complex, which wasn't in existence years ago. But I remember 5 of the 14 theaters were vaudeville houses here. St. George, the Paramount, you can name the Empire, but it's all passé today. Cinderblock Foundation, that's it.
Yeah,
Cinderblock walls,
yeah.
put up little draperies for acoustics, and the theater was
In the
carried.
old days, they always had a vaudeville act that they had live.
Oh, always had
You were
5
telling
acts.
me about Bela Lugosi that came out here.
Well, I did a horror show with him.
Yeah.
And Saturday night, I'm on the stage playing cards with the stagehands, and our opening cue was Thunder and Lightning. The next thing I know, we all run upstairs. Thunder and Lightning outside. We left
The real thing.
the real thing. And he took the last bus from Staten Island to New York. And nobody, he had a camel's hair coat, nobody didn't pay any attention to him.
Just went off into the rain?
He went out in the rain to get the last bus to go to New York, and nobody knew who he was.
How did he fit into the show?
Well, they had a horror show, a midnight horror show. They did his movie, and
in other words, a Bela Lugosi movie.
with a
And he
Chinese
appeared.
torture magician show. We planted 2 women to faint in the show. They brought down perhaps 5 or 6 women. We planted vibrators under the seats, 36 vibrators, right? We put them under the seats. I've had trap boxes. Backs came out over the balcony.
Right.
And we had a great casket on the stage, a black velvet cyc, candelabras on there, the whole bit. And in those days, it probably only cost 55 cents to it.
Wow.
And to see the
movie
production, yes,
vaudeville act
at
and
midnight and a Saturday night.
I guess
midnight
that's,
and
I guess
Saturday
that's
night.
why Bela Lugosi had to take a bus back home.
Well, Bella talked to nobody, even during the production.
Mm-hmm.
Peter Lorre, I worked with him in Danbury Candlewood Theater in Connecticut. He was just the opposite. He drank a bottle of scotch before the production. I would pass his dressing room, and there I would see Peter Lorre smiling all the time.
Yeah, well.
But Bella was just the opposite.
Yeah, worrying about getting back to Manhattan.
Well, perhaps.
55-cent ticket.
That's
You don't
what they-
remember the movie, huh?
I don't remember. It was one of his.
It'd be interesting.
It was black and white, of course, and they just put the feature on, and the whole thing was a live show.
Yeah, and those were
With
the
him
days.
being the,
Yeah, those were the days where you had the orchestras and the pits. And
Right.
Frank, you remember that?
Oh, I worked in them. I don't remember them.
Yeah.
I worked in them.
he worked with all the music masters,
Right.
perhaps.
Well,
That's
you
right.
were with the Schuberts for 40 years, no?
Something like that.
Yeah.
But the vaudeville days, we had eight acts on a bill and a
Yeah.
picture. And as Frank said here, 55 cents, we even have them down to a quarter.
I remember those days.
8 acts and a picture.
When I was a
What
boy,
did they pay you?
there was no orchestra. A woman played the piano, 10 cents to go into the movie.
Yeah, I remember that.
You
Frank.
remember that? And
We
the
had
woman played
the Blaine organist at the church on Sunday, and during the week he used to play the piano at the Life Theater in Meriden. Yeah.
Well, in my day, I even worked in a place where we had silent movies and we played the piano.
Right.
Right.
I had a place in Coney Island called the Queensland. You came in, you bought a 5-cent glass of beer, and you watched the picture.
Is that where you
Meanwhile, I
met?
was playing the piano.
Is that where you met Cary Grant?
No, Cary Grant, I forget where I met him originally. He was a doorman at one of the theaters,
Yeah.
a handsome boy. And we just did a show with Will Morrissey and Johnny DeSilva that we called The Last Exit. It lasted a week on Broadway, the show. And Cary Grant was in it. Of course, at that time he was called Archie Leach. But the name of Cary Grant was in the show itself. That was the name of the character.
Oh.
And we put him on a bus and sent him to Hollywood. And he became a big star. I think we put out $45 to get him on a bus.
That's something.
Something like that.
You know, it's a great privilege for me to sit here with an old music master.
And every time Gary came into New York, he'd always come and see us at the Schubert office on the 6th floor
Yeah.
and say hello. And it was always nice that way.
You know, Frank, you were talking about Jumbo and the Elephant and
Oh,
where the
yeah.
music had to play
in-
real loud.
In the
and-
Hippodrome in New York?
Yeah, the Hippodrome.
Well, we had a ramp going down the stage,
Yeah.
black velvet cyc in the back. And when the elephant went down the ramp, he was thumping so loud, the orchestra leader got the stage manager and said, louder, louder, louder. He had an upbeat with the music so the people in the orchestra wouldn't hear him. I remember that.
Paul Whiteman was the famous orchestra leader, was in that show,
Ah,
Jumbo.
Yep.
Yeah. And Billy Rose produced it.
Right?
Jock Whitney was one of the big financiers of the show.
who?
Jock Whitney,
Oh, Jock Whitney.
Yeah.
Maybe the millionaire. Yeah.
big millionaire. And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, you don't have those people or the theaters today.
Well,
Yeah, that was.
it was a glorious age.
You know, Frank, all the years I worked in the theater, my most embarrassing moment in the theater was with you people in an orchestra,
The which?
with the orchestra.
With the orchestra.
Right. I mean, we were all set to go. This director of the pit there, Harry Russell, tall fella,
Yeah, right.
the tall fella there, was stiff shirt, and there was about 40 pieces in the orchestra. They all had lights. In some way, he had no light. See, and he kept with the baton, hitting the baton, and the next thing, the girls are to the right, and the men were to we're doing the Student Prince, the opening of the Student Prince. So I couldn't get out. I did something I never did in my life. I broke through the front traveler to get out there to look in the pit and see why the director wouldn't start the show. And he kept hitting the baton, and the fellas had the lights on the balcony. They were all energized. They hit me smack in the eyes because I kept the stage down because the woman talked so much. I lowered the lights. Before I opened up that front traveler, I kept the woman
That's how you
quiet.
get them to come.
I got them all calmed down. Then the next thing you know, I run out from the dim lights out to the bright lights. I didn't
Right.
take the house lights down.
Can't see now.
And it hit me, and the fellow said, jump here. And as God is my judge, I jumped to the cello. Dr. Cecil Boyd and his wife both played the cello. And I picked it up, and when I got in the pit, it looked like a puppet. It disintegrated. I held the cello up in the air.
The audience probably figured that's part
Well,
of the
they
act.
all laughed and everything else. And Harry Russell, never a smile. He just stood there, and the plug was loose. If he would have bent down, but with his long tails on, in the pit, he wouldn't move. See? And I had to run underneath there to put the plug in. That's
He
all
had
it
no
was.
light.
'Cause in those days, we all wore full dress suits with the tails.
That's what he had.
And stiff shirts, today it's much different. The
You
only
know,
place you see that now is at the Philharmonic or the symphony orchestras.
half the time you don't even see an orchestra in the pit. They're
Right.
backstage,
That's
at the
right.
right or left stage.
Well, I
They're
don't know of
hidden.
any other than Radio City Music Hall where they got really a pit and all that now.
Well, the Hippodrome had, I think. We used to
No, I
elevate the
mean
platforms
now,
there.
now.
The old Hippodrome.
Today.
The Roxy
Very
had
nice,
it.
very
Paramount.
nice.
Today,
Oh,
who's,
yeah.
no, today.
So I can tell you very soon. So we had it in the Rivoli, the Rivoli Theater on Broadway.
Yeah.
We had a rising orchestra, and we'd be doing a show there. And I never forget the drummer. His name was Gentili. He was a very famous symphony drummer. And he was as the platform was going up, he fell right off it because he was right at that
He
tip in the
fell off.
back. He fell right off the platform, drums and all.
Drums and all.
That's while the stage was going up. Yeah. We had to, then at the Rivoli Theater with Ben Burney,
Yeah.
in between shows, because we do a lot of shows in those days, one after the other, 28 shows a week.
Wow.
And I used to sleep under the piano because the piano was draped. And I fell asleep there, and I woke up at like 3 o'clock in the morning,
Right.
pitch dark. Everybody's looking for the piano. What happened to the piano player? And I come off with the car. I didn't know where I was.
Speaking of knowing where you were, you traveled a lot with shows.
Oh,
no?
well, we all traveled, right?
Yeah, and
We sure did.
how did you travel in those? Today, getting a plane, you're going
No, travel always by train.
by train
right.
only.
Yeah, a lot of people
Right.
did this too.
In those days, everything was we went by train.
Yeah, well, Frank flew a lot, you know.
Well,
In
there
fact,
was no
I think you
flying
had
in
your
those
own
days.
airplane, Frank, right?
No.
Well, the old since Detroit, the old Fokker plane, the Ford plane,
Yeah.
it was 14 stops from Hollywood to New York, 4 days, no night flying. And the stewardess, she had a long dress on her with a bonnet hat. She was a registered nurse back in those days.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they had to be,
they had to
they
be
had to be
single.
registered places to be.
We used to land in the cornfield. We landed at Holmes Airport in Jackson Heights. There was no Kennedy or LaGuardia Airport. I came for all things bulbs. The L Ramp Lamp Works in
For
Hoboken.
bulbs?
For bulbs. I was sent here for bulbs.
In
wasn't-
Big Hollywood, they had no bulbs.
They came from the east, believe it or not.
Isn't
They didn't
that something?
manufacture them out there. We had the big 5,000, 10,000 watt bulbs. After we burn them a few hours, we shake them upside down with black sand to clean
Right.
inside the bulb. They were Mogul bi-post lamps in those days. And it was very interesting. When I lived in Cuba, when Batista, I was involved with the dictator there, and I would spend 12 hours to take a boat, the Managua, P&O line to Miami, to get good food. I'd come on a weekend just to come to Miami to eat and go back again the Sunday night. Now you fly over in 30 minutes.
All right.
See?
Yeah. Well, you had your own plane, too, didn't you?
No. I flew some crates,
Ah.
but I never owned a plane, no.
And
Back-
where did you park that?
Well,
At Holmes?
out west, no, I never had a plane. I never owned a plane. Out west, I get in there for the kicks of it. I took lessons and I flew,
Ah.
see? And back in those days, it was a novelty, you know. They did stunt flying and people in the business with shows and fairs and that generation, you know, it was reasonable to see an air show. I never participated in it, but most of my life was driving a truck in the show business. 10 years with the lights.
Yeah, well, you had
And
the
with the
generator.
generator.
No generator, no light.
No, I had to get to the town, and there was dust storms out west in the 30s, terrible dust storms. I was in an earthquake in Helena, Montana in 35. Then I came with Son Jahini, the ice skater, in 1937.
Now, you traveled quite a bit with her.
Well, I did the first ice show in America with her. Most all the first sports I did, but that was the first ice show I did with her.
Uh-huh.
Napoleon Garden in Los Angeles, St. Louis, Chicago, New York, Boston, Miami. We got to the Orange Bowl, we couldn't freeze the ice. We had a 10 by 10 compressor and a 12 by 12 frick compressor, and the warm wind was just floating across the rink. We had to go to Barman Bailey's in Sarasota and get a big canvas and cover the ice. My father held her coat. She started the show down a ramp in a sled, and my father would hold her coat for her. See, and that was quite an experience. She wasn't married then. I knew her brother, knew her father back in those days. Even went to the racetrack at Hialeah. That's how old that track is.
Ah.
1937. It's over 50 years ago.
Well, Tony, why don't you tell us something about yourself? Now, you've done a lot of
Great.
traveling with Jim Jensen and all these people.
Yeah, well,
You almost got killed in Africa.
that's
You
true.
went to jail.
That's true.
So tell us about it. That
It's
was-
all true. But I'd rather hear about Frank with the circus. They lit the first ball field.
Well, but we got to get
First
back.
ball, imagine there was no light.
But we can't escape the pioneer here with the film because you and I work with the same master. So we'll have to get on to you,
Yeah,
Tony.
good old
That's right.
Eugene.
Yeah. Well, lighting sports in those years, in 1933, I went to Florida. And New York Yankees and the House of David, a team with beards on, we charged 25 cents for the first night baseball game. Our gross receipts was $54. The New York
54
Yankees
bucks.
got $18. I got $18 for the lights, and the House of David got $18. And things were so poor that Roosevelt shut the banks down for a month. And I couldn't get
What
any
year
money.
was that, Frank?
That was
1933.
1933.
2 or 3, right.
33. It was either March or April. And I remembered well because I broke out with pimples all over me eating oranges. See, I didn't have any money, and you couldn't get any money. and we
You
were,
just go pick oranges and eat them.
and we just went town to town, city to city, coast to coast on a percentage.
With this
Every-
team. With the,
Right, with the House of Dave. We had Babe Drinkerson, the girl athlete, with us, and Grover Cleveland Alexander, which the West adored him, the pitcher. And we went to different towns, and Dutch Storm, of course, old Grover Cleveland liked to drink. Many a times they would idolize a man so much that he would shut the town down. And he'd jump on the truck with me, and the roads wasn't paved in those years. They were all dusty. When I get him into the next town, we want to see Alexander. He was covered with dirt and dust to get him to the next town. But it was, for a young fella, I had a lot of, perhaps all the fights in sports.
yeah.
See,
Well,
which
then you were with the circus.
well,
What
with
year was
circus and
that?
carnivals. The circus, well, it was quite a few years there. I was there with him one time, and I was with him again.
What was the name of the circus, Frank?
There was Andy Brothers shows. I was married then. I believe I had one. I may have had 2 children. We were living in a tent, and Professor Keller, he came in with his Wild Animal Act, and incidentally, he was a professor originally from University of Pennsylvania, but he got into animals, I guess was his lifestyle then. And he came in those days it was very crude. When I run a generator, I had to make the lights, and there's no transmission, it was just a direct drive. Once they knocked the lights off, I had to throttle the engine down. So I got a cue from him with a flashlight to kill the lights. My wife then was sitting with the
You mean in the tent?
she was in the tent. This is the main tent, the main show. He was in the line act. He was the first performer to hypnotize the animals. He'd go in without a whip and without a gun and all that kind of stuff. He was the first man to do it. And incidentally, the sad part of the whole story is he dropped dead in the lion's cage.
Really?
That's what happened to him. And the animals never bothered him. He laid there.
When was
Professor
that,
Keller.
Frank?
Oh, that came much later. I was off the road then.
Yeah.
That came much later. But anyway, he had a double pole switch inside the tent. So he would pull the switch down. His helper would flash the light. I'd drop the lights. Next thing you know, I get a signal to put the lights on. No lights came on. And he's hollering, lights, lights, lights.
No, the entire tent is dark. The only audience.
The whole audience is dark. There's about 2,000, perhaps 2,500 people in the
And
audience.
there's no light.
There's no lights.
And he's in the cage with the tigers and
Right.
the lions.
And I checked my generator. I'm good. I put a test right on the board. I'm hot
Right.
going in. But he had so many wires in the place, so I ran into the tent when he kept howling, lights, lights, lights.
Help, help.
And I ran in there, and I opened up the door, and I looked. The wire dropped down from the double pole switch, so he didn't have a contact. So what happened? I ran in there. I ripped the wires direct.
Right, you
So-
go right into the lion's cage.
Yes. So I went in. I tied the wires direct, and my wife the baby was sleeping in the tent. My wife was sitting in the audience with the clown's daughter that rode the bicycle act in the show. She's there watching the show. So then, the next thing you know, a fella comes over me he said to me, I'm from the Ever Ready Flashlight. He gave me $25 and he bought the story. And they had it in all like popular signs. And
But you got the lights going again.
Oh yes, yeah, the lights came right up and that was it. So he gave me $25 to buy the story.
Well, there must have been a hell of a cheer going up from the audience, no?
Well, oh yeah, back in
Maybe he
those
blew
days,
his act, Frank.
the-
He walked in the dark right into the lion's cage.
well, you had a duty to do.
Yeah, I know.
Back in those days, how many nights I didn't sleep like you traveling on the road. The show had to go on, and actually I had to
That's right.
fall into the area that way there. And that night was a strange thing too. They shot a horse, 2 horses to feed the animals. They had no food.
Oh, wow.
So they shot a horse and I was playing cards with the lime tamer and with a couple other fellas.
Right.
The wife was sleeping. I sit there playing cards. Next thing you know, the 2 color fellas came in to carry water for the elephants. They were under a canvas on the ground. He threw a piece of horse meat there. And the lions came out and they saw them. They looked at the lions. They put the canvas over their head. The
Yeah,
next
well,
morning,
I imagine so.
I was sleeping. They took off.
I imagine so.
Yep. But that was quite an experience in that show. And then years ago, they used to give you 5-gallon cans of gas, to feed the light plant, and there was dirt in it and crap in it. Next thing you know, the Mazoras with a high act up there. 2 boys and a girl, 100 feet in the air, juggling, things like that. The lights started to drop.
Flutter.
They started to drop. I said, uh-oh, the plant's missing. I got too much dirt in the carburetor. See, I knew what it was. I ran into the tent and my wife, run out and tell them to kill the yak. I can't hold the lights. I put 5,000 people in darkness. That's what happened there. But that's getting back to the old roadie
things
days.
are really
The old roadie days in the days.
rough.
But Tony,
But
Get
there's
into
not
our
even
good
enough to
friend.
buy gas. I mean, proper
well,
gas.
gas
is
was
so good.
15 cents a gallon.
Imagine.
And Abe Saperstein, that owned the Harlem Globetrotters, he was
Yeah.
my booking agent. He became a millionaire later on. I would back his car up to my generator to sipe the gas out so he can get to the next town. His headquarters was in Chicago, and he booked me all out west, and, you name it,
Yeah.
up northwest Canada, Moose Jaw, Swift Current, Medicine Hat, Lexbridge, Escoman, Regina, Edmonton, into remote places that never
You
saw
were
a
telling
night
me
game.
once about in a ball field. You were sleeping, and the moonshiners had.
I was in Chicago.
Yeah.
That was 1935. So I was tired. I came from Tiffin, Ohio, and I played in East Chicago. And I put the portable lights up there, and the game was over. Everybody went out. The next thing you know, I shut the lights down, and I decided to sleep in a ballpark to save $1. The Milner hotels were $1 in the 30s.
Uh-huh.
So I used to spend $1. A Chinese meal was 35 cents, a full meal. I used to spend that. And $1 for the hotel a night to save the buck, I slept in the ballpark. 1 o'clock in the morning, I see lanterns in it. There wasn't many flashlights back in those years. I see lanterns in there. I said, what the heck is this? I didn't take the lights down. Are they going to steal the lights? So I get up out of the truck.
Steal the lights.
I get up out of the truck. I go over in the center field there. A fella comes over me with a big shotgun. Get back to where'd you come from? I said, I came from the truck. These are my lights here.
Yeah.
He said, you go back to the truck and go to sleep. They opened up the grass. They took the plywood out, and there was all hundreds of 5-gallon cans of alcohol. See, in the ballpark, in the ballpark,
Right.
in center field, buried underneath. And so I was a young boy, sowing my wild oats, and that was the lifestyle back in those years, in the 30s. I started in 1930, but those 10 years I put were rough. Nobody had any money. You worked with the biggest stars, you didn't make anything. Nothing to speak about, the stars.
I have budgets from those years in the Schubert office where some of the people became biggest stars, all were getting $75 a week, top salary.
Sure.
Up to $150. That was the top. Had to really be somebody to get $150 a week.
The ball players got $200 a month.
$75 a week was the
$200
average
a month they
salary.
got.
And that was for stars.
Boy, and they talk about the good old days.
Well, they were a different breed.
But don't forget, everything was $75 a week in those years was very big money. Because the average salary on the street was about $16 a week. So when you got $75 a week, you were getting big money.
Yeah, well,
Against $16 a week.
what Frank said.
Well, you know what I noticed? In the Depression, I was working. And when people they had no money, the few pennies that they had, they would go to see a show. They needed an uplift. It used to amaze me. I see a whole block line of people going to the bread line.
Right.
Men selling apples on the street for a nickel apiece. But in the same token, I see a line outside the movies. And I'm just thinking how, right near you, 23rd Street
Right.
and 8th Avenue, was it? Yeah, the elevator was 9th Avenue. Was the Loewy's movie there. And I saw this big long line, all women. I said, what is this here? There's no men in this line in the Chelsea neighborhood there. It was a free fortune teller.
A free fortune
teller on the vaudeville bill there. They had a free fortune teller. And right a block from where you live, Tony, I see all, it was a vaudeville house there. See, it was 35 cents then to go to that house. And all the women were so inquisitive. I guess they wanted to.
Yeah, well, they used to give free dishes and
Free dishes.
Yes.
You used to give out
Gimmicks.
tickets. You got free turkey or free chicken.
But
now
people
there's
needed
$7 a ticket for a movie
People
house.
need an entertainment. When things are so low, they need that uplift. And they would spend that few pennies just to look for a little enlightenment in
Yeah,
life,
well, they had
to eliminate the depression.
the
that they were-
houses were different then.
Right.
You don't have a theater other than Radio City Music Hall today.
No.
There's no
Well,
Hippodrome.
No.
There's no fancy place you come in, put up
Well,
a cinder
everything-
block place.
Everything
Well,
is so inflated today.
no
You
stage.
can't do it.
I took the last big chandelier
$7
down.
bucks a $7 for a movie, Frank.
Yeah, well,
That's a lot
the
of
mayor,
dough.
the mayor doesn't approve of that, for one thing. But I remember taking the last chandelier down at the St. George. It weighed 3 tons. Elaine Bowies was the columnist, the woman that wrote the story. So I brought her up there with me. I said, now we're above the theater. It's quiet. Below us, there's thousands of eyes sitting there. So all concentrating to the screen. But we're up here. This is where the piece of the theater is upstairs here.
Yeah.
So I started to hand crank the chandelier down. And the vibration, she shook. She wanted to run out. See, with the loud noise, when I brought the chandelier, it wasn't taken down in 30 years. We brought it down to relamp it up with Dick Reed, the manager of ABC. He did the show there. And he said, Frank, we got to relamp this chandelier up. I said, we'll bring it down. Every house has a winch.
Yeah, yeah.
Every house has got a hand winch. There's no motors to it. We'll crank it down. I'll bring it right down. And the thing came down. However, of course,
What did happen to that?
it's still up. But they closed the theater down. Well, the
Well,
theater.
he was, you remember we went up to see John, and John says, when I bought the theater, there was a chandelier. Where's the chandelier?
He
Where's the chandelier?
He never looked up. He
Where's
never
the
looked up.
chandelier?
It was always up.
You see?
Well, the prices, when he first did Jesus Christ Superstar
Yeah.
off Broadway, they put that whole show on for $45,000. Today you can't do a show of that type under $1 million off Broadway.
Off Broadway.
That's right.
It's remarkable, isn't it, Frank?
$45,000.
Yeah, I
And
remember.
that's not too far away from the years.
I remember you telling me that this house up here, when I went to research the St. George,
Right.
that was put up in 1929.
Mhm.
And you said they used to call that was one of Schubert's, they call it the flop house? This one and the one in Westchester. You said those were
Yeah,
the
the
two.
one in Westchester, yeah, we could never get things working.
They'd
there.
call it the flop house.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, send a plate to the flop house.
Well, we had a theater in New York like that. The Martin Beck Theater was that way.
Now, what did they do?
One
They
in
used
there.
to test out
We had
the-
another theater on 54th Street. Was a house that was jinxed. Every time we did a show there, it flopped.
Majestic Theater, they didn't last long there
Yeah,
either.
yeah,
Only I remembered South Pacific, Mary Martin and Paisley. What used to amaze me is they would bless themselves every night before the show.
Yeah.
They would go in the corner, both Mary Martin and Paisley, and
Yeah.
bless themselves 4 or 5 times and go out. But that house, for some reason or other, now they got a
Yeah, right.
big show coming in, but for some reason or other, some of these houses don't take it. But the very first off-Broadway show in New York, the very first one, a lot of people don't know, was Tennessee Williams in the Garden District. Warner Leroy, Moyman Leroy's son, was the producer of it.
You mean Pits and Needles?
No, Garden District.
Oh, God.
Tennessee Williams Garden District. We did it at First Avenue and 62nd Street, on the west side of the street. That was the very first off-Broadway show. And the union made a concession, 299 seats to the house. And they brought
Yeah,
in,
well, that's where
they
you
only put one
negotiate.
man in the house then.
Yeah.
Tony, get back to the films. Your,
Now, you tell us something
your
about...
baby,
Yeah,
your
I
baby,
have a couple
Tony.
of more questions.
Okay, Tony.
Okay.
Fine.
One, Frank, you have any old tunes from the past in your new play?
Yes. Yes, I do have
old-
some tunes from
The old,
that I consider the first-class tunes, were well received, well written up, newspapers, and definitely I'm using them in my new show.
To Be Alive.
To Be Alive, right. And it's great to be alive,
We can all accept that.
right. And to be in love.
It should appeal to everybody. That
And to
title
love the
alone should
people.
bring him into the box
Right.
office.
I just wrote a new song
Yeah.
called Before It's Too Late.
Oh, sounds like a good title.
I'd like to read it to you.
I'm all ears.
I brought it here especially to read it to you. This is a song that's for the people. And it says, before it's too late, let's stop all the hate. And why can't we be friends before it's too late? Before it's too late, let's smile and have fun. Let love rule the world before it's too late. The laughter of children who grow knowing fun, to be a good neighbor, to trust all as one, for all time, before it's too late. Before it's too late, let's not be too sad. And let there be love before it's too late. Before it's too late, let love rule the world with love in our hearts before it's too late. Let's dance in the streets. Let's walk and be safe. Let's talk without fear. Let's hope to be free, to respect human rights, to have peace on this earth before it's too late.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got music
Oh, yes.
already? Yeah.
If we had our piano here, I would play it for you. But we don't have
Well,
a
we
piano
got a
here, so we
little
can't play it.
Broken down one there.
And no, that's out. Impossible.
It's impossible.
Impossible. But I think that's what we need. We need less hate.
That's
I
very
agree
true.
with
To be able to walk in the streets and be safe. And to have human rights for the people.
Well, in our time, Frank, we obeyed everybody.
Yeah,
You
right.
obeyed your parents. If you got in trouble with them, if you got in trouble in
That's it.
school, you got up from your father and mother. You obeyed the elders. It was a natural aspect in life. Today it's lost. But
I can tell you a little funny story about a very famous woman called Louise Reiner.
oh yes, Yeah, the
Louise
Fr-
Reiner was
the
an
French woman.
Oscar woman. She made that big picture from China. I forget the name of it now. She was a
the
big
good
star.
earth was it?
The Good Earth.
Good
Right.
Earth.
So we were doing a French farce, which she was French,
Right.
and the show was a bad show. And we opened the show in Detroit. Now, we got bad notices, and she wanted to get out of the show, and she didn't know how. But she had an iron-bound contract to stay with the show. And the Schuberts
Ironclad.
wanted to keep it going on a kind of a name.
Oh.
And so finally, we thought up a stunt to get her out and close the show. We had a doctor make a certificate out for her that she was pregnant. And that was the only reason were
The
able
only
to close
clause.
that show. Right,
Isn't
that they didn't
something?
cover. And that's a true story.
And she got out of it.
Now, there are many famous stories we can tell, real stories that are in that backstage theater which you can't talk about, but they did exist. And some of them were very funny, some of them were tragic. But today, as I look at them, a lot of it was fun to be able to even think about them. Although it's 30 and 40 years later,
Yeah,
maybe
well, they
longer.
say sooner or later you.
Did you work with Stephen Humphrey?
Did I work with Simon Romberg? I sure did. We had to tell you a funny story about a show called My Romance, which we did at the Schubert Theater in those years. J.J. Schubert asked me to see if we could get a new singer that had some sort of a name. So I went to Gene Selznick, who was the head of the picture company. You heard of Gene Selznick.
Oh, of course.
And he had a little girl there called Ann Jeffries, who used to do pictures with horses. The pretty girl, like Elizabeth Taylor, always with the horses. But nobody knew that she was a great singer. They never used her voice in pictures. And I went to Gene Selznick. I said, "Look, you have a little girl that I'd like Schubert to be interested in her. We could use her." I told him. He says she was doing grade C pictures at the time, horse pictures.
Right.
Pretty girl with the horse and always winning at the end. And he said, "You can have her for $750 a week." Well, I went back to JJ, and JJ said, "Offer him $250. That's top." If you knew JJ, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, Schubert, sure.
So I went to Gene and said, "Look, I said, the best we can do is $250 a week." And that was big money in those days.
It was.
So he gave it to us for $250 a week, and we did this show called My Romance at the Schubert Theater, right on 44th Street. And that was a Romberg show. And we used to write the music over the telephone. He was in California, he'd be calling in stuff, and we write it out here and write the ballets and everything else. We put the show on. The show lasted 6 months. Right after that, Ann Jeffries got a job with the first series called Mr. Topper.
Mr. Topper.
That was where he was an angel, nobody can see him except her. And she
Right.
got $1,500 a performance from $250 in the
It's quite
theater.
a climb.
Right. That was Ann Jeffries.
Right.
She was a beautiful girl and had a beautiful voice. You remember her, don't you? And Jeffries?
I don't remember. I remember Sigmund well. He was
I
a
think,
big party
oh,
fellow.
yeah.
One thing that I enjoyed with Sigmund, I was stage manager at Harlem Hospital 5 years during the war. We had all the Broadway shows coming, as you know, Frank. So as I was eating in a restaurant with Sigmund Rumberg, I said, Sigmund, I like the music that you write. And those words I never forgot. He said, Frank, I write for the middle brow. That's the way he put it, you know, like the average people. So, of course, he came much before. And then, I guess you're one of the masters left today. They're all,
well, I know
Mantovani is still around.
I knew Sigmund when he was playing the piano in a place called
14th Street?
on Basanabees, I think the name of the place was. It was a restaurant. I think it was around 39th Street. Basanabees restaurant.
He was in Luchow's, I think, originally, too.
Yeah, it could be. But, and he used to play the piano there, and Schubert gave him $50 a week for the shows to write.
50 a week.
But most of the shows that he had, he brought from Europe, you know.
Yes.
Student Prince and all of the old European shows, Blossom Time, Student Prince, and we had
Why didn't they have masters to write that music today? And why are there no people around? The civilization has changed to rock and roll and
well, that's what
completely concept of
Synthesized
music.
music, there's no more musicians.
rock and roll.
Well, am I so outdated, Frank? That,
rock and roll actually outdated,
law here with
outdated me.
well,
But that's why, by doing this show to be alive, we have nostalgic music in it. Very
No,
nostalgic.
nothing synthesized. No synthesized music, all live.
No. It's a show a little bit on the style that you just saw on Broadway that they thought it would last a week and lasted a couple of years, Sugar Babies.
Right.
That kind of a show. Good comics, old-time comics. I want both young people and old people in the show.
well, Mantovani used to play sort of in a nice even string.
Right.
He came to the Paramount Theater one
Here
night.
on Staten Island?
Yes.
Yeah.
John played here for a concert series program. There was no heat in the theater. It was cold as anything. And John was in the dressing room shivering. And I was stage manager the show there, and he said to me, is my public ready? See, and he came out there, and that was the pit there. So anyway, they brought the pit up. John come out, went on the pit, and one of the stagehands pressed the button when he's ready to start the show and lowered the pit.
And the pit went down.
They lowered the pit went down.
Right.
I said, who did this? You know what I mean? Nobody knew nothing.
Yeah.
See, but the poor man shivered there.
Yeah, what a surprise
Oh,
that was.
he shivered out there.
Well,
And he couldn't do the second act quick enough. He said, Frank, is my public waiting? He said, yes, they're waiting.
well,
I
we
said,
shivered in a lot of places
How
in those
come
days.
those-
That was the only place you shivered. I knew the Paramount here very well.
well,
in fact, with
Fabian House, sure.
It's a shame
Rudy-
to see.
Fabian owned the house.
Remember when
Sure.
Rudy Valley came out here?
He did, that's right.
It's a shame what happened to that house. I mean, that's
But
a
I'll tell you a funny story about
two
the,
circular to come up from the pit. You got two circular little stages for a grand
You
piano.
talk about the old Majestic Theater on Broadway. You were
Oh,
talking
yeah.
about a few minutes ago.
Sure.
We had the head electrician there. You should remember him. Brown, his name was. He used to drink like a fish. He was good Irishman. Like my girlfriend, good Irish.
Well.
And we're doing we're going in there usually we used to go there to rehearse the shows, you know.
Yeah.
And we couldn't find Brown, so without Brown you couldn't put the lights on. And we're all there shivering in the theater in the afternoon, and with no Brown around, and nobody else could touch those lights. He was the head electrician, union law. So we're standing around, and Schubert walks in around. Now we're there from maybe about 9 o'clock in the morning, and it was cold.
Wow.
A dark house, cold house,
Maybe that's why Brown drank.
and
Keep warm.
well, he was a hell of a guy. We had a lot of fun with him. You should remember. And Schubert comes in around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We're all sitting there doing nothing. Can't do anything. No lights, no nothing. Couldn't do anything. So he's worrying about all the rehearsal money he's paying, and no
Nobody's rehearsing.
no rehearsal. So Schubert always used to fire us every Friday. We'd get fired for no reason at all, just policy.
What do you mean? You walk in
And he'd walk
and say
in.
you're fired?
Right.
He had a 9 o'clock call. Nothing happened at 4 o'clock, so that's his
You're
alibi.
fired.
I used to get fired almost every Friday, and I lasted over 35 years.
35 years you lasted with him.
Yeah,
I
something
think.
like that.
Had a pit there.
Originally I was under contract to his brother-in-law, Edward Davidow. in 1930. David Dow was married to his sister, and he hated him. Schubert hated David Dow. David Dow used to be a very noble German, and he couldn't stand him. He's married to his sister. So he bought my contract from David Dow.
You had a contract with David Dow.
That's right. That's how I went to the Schuberts. See, at that time I was also under contract with MCA. That was a very small company at that time. MCA only had I had two bands at that time, Ben Burney and Guy Lombardo. They used to be on top of the Paramount Theater,
Oh, yeah.
where their office was.
Yeah.
Julie Stein was the head of that.
Oh, yeah. Good songwriter.
Right. Not the songwriter. Julie Stein was a dentist.
Well, how about Julie Stein that wrote?
I don't mean it's not the same
Or
Julie
was
Stein.
another one?
There was Julie Stein out of Chicago.
Okay.
And matter of fact, they brought him back recently, and I think then he finally died. He had retired. He came back to. But today MCA is a big outfit. At that time, you only had two bands under contract, Ben Burney, and they wanted to buy my contract as a conductor and pianist. Instead, Schubert took me over. And that's how I went with the Schubert organization.
I bought the Schubert's Warehouse out in 1956. Easter Day, it made the first page of the Daily News. It burned to the ground. Another
You
fella,
mean all the sets and all
everything.
the
Max
props
and I were partners
I
in New
remember-
York.
I remember
See?
that fire very well.
Oh, yeah.
Because we used to go there every Saturday to look at the stuff, JJ and I.
Well,
Take
Philippine
inventory,
chauffeur.
I mean.
Well,
what's the
I
mean?
took my wife, I think I had 4 kids in the station wagon. I pulled in the gas station. Sunday morning, I had to meet Vinnie Zangara and Gino Besser, the opera producers. They wanted to buy sets from me. So Max, I was in partners with, said, Frank, Schubert said, you want to keep the insurance up? We said, no, we'll let Max talk me out. We don't need the insurance anymore. We're going to sell all the TV studios. We'll be out of there in a few months. So what happened was I pulled in the gas station. I saw all the flames there. I said, is there wood burning here? So what happened? There it was, front and Lewis Street, the whole block,
Right.
the whole thing
I remember
burned to the
well.
ground. And I just come back from the Dominican Republic where I lost my shirt when they assassinated the dictator down there.
Well, then you were down there when I was doing the shows in the Dominican Republic.
56.
For the
56 I did the show.
for the was the 25th anniversary.
That's right. I tell you what happened.
They
there.
owed me $50,000.
Well, I lost my shirt.
Well,
It took me 7
we
years to
took
save the
Minsky
money.
down there and everything.
Right. With Trujillo, what happened there, Bob Courtney was the producer from Hollywood. I met him. And he said, Frank, I want to bring you in to light the World's Fair. It's going to be the biggest thing you ever did. And he went with a couple of cameramen, and they got killed during lunch hour. The plane crashed, and he talked to Trujillo to do the 25th anniversary, which you just mentioned, was they killed the Haitians.
Right.
See, and that was his big, where you went, there was a statue. There was a picture of him. And I was treated like a king. See, I met his daughter, Angelita, I met his sister, and I never should have went there because I signed a contract and I got wiped out. Then I came back and had this fire with Schubert. I said to the wife, let's go to the Chinese restaurant, we're broke. And we went in there and said, let's get a meal, we're wiped out. That was
Well,
1956.
talking about Dominican Republic, that's
Oh, yes.
because Felix and I went down there.
I
Felix
lived in
Brentano.
Embarcador. I had a suite in the
We had-
Embarcador Hotel.
They wouldn't work. We had to bring the people in from Cuba to work to build the place up.
Really?
I was there when when the hurricane hit. I was there.
Oh yeah. They said they wrote a check out for $50,000 for me right here to National City Bank.
Yeah.
Hey.
And what
But they changed the Minister of Finance, which was I forget a relative of his. So every time they changed the Minister of Finance, you were stuck. So I came to collect the money, and they wouldn't give me the money. There's no money.
I
Isn't
got
that something?
13 tons of equipment I got down there.
And the money was in the bank here, but they couldn't release it.
Release it. Isn't that
Release it.
something?
Not only that, there's a bank draft involved. It cost you 20%. Trujillo gave me a check of $15,000. That's all I ever got out of them. I was to get $2,000 a week
We
from my
never got a
services.
nickel out of it.
Well, that's
We
all
got
I ever
stuck
got.
altogether.
Yeah, but we lost $43,000. They,
And
So-
the thing really never went on.
no, it was a one man's. He was a benefactor, the God, the creator. He was
Yeah.
everything of the
It was the
country.
25th anniversary.
That's
he was
correct.
A dictator.
That's
And it
correct.
never came off.
No, 1956. One good thing, I had the first baby of the year. That's what came out of it.
We lost.
That's what came out
As a
of
matter of
that.
fact, I think we got the United States government to bail us out of there.
Well, I never got bailed out. after they killed the dictator, they didn't want to know nothing. The next
Same way you
administration
mentioned
came
Batista
in.
before. I changed
Well,
I
Fulgencio
changed his
Batista.
pesos when they pushed him out for his wife right here at the New York Athletic Club in New
Well,
York.
Adolph Luque was the pitcher of the New York Giants. He became the coach. He brought me to Cuba. He said, Frank, can you light up the first night baseball game in Cuba? So I lived there 23 months. See, and he formed the league. He had the Almendares Club, and he was a great gambler with cockfights. I went to his house on the Saturday. All day the Cubans would bet on the cockfights. But the very first night in Tropical Park, see, I had to go to 6 cities in Cuba, and I love Cuba. I really like the people there in the old days, and I can't go back again today, unfortunately, but if it was a wish, I'd love to go back to Cuba again. I had good moments there. But the very first night game at Tropical Stadium, they had a riot. I had to shut the lights off in the 7th inning, and the dictator's sitting in his box right there. I had to black out to save my life. 20,000 people ran out in the field. I said, what, are they going to tear everything down? See, and the quickest thing for me to do is black out. See, I learned that a good many times in the theater, too. So I blacked the lights out, and the funny thing, the first night I put the lights on, the balls were popping all over the place. I said, what the heck is this? I run to the generator, I'm all right here. I go up there and I climb and I watch them. The big bugs, the tropical bugs, the juice was blowing all the bulbs out on me.
Ah, they hit the lamp.
Yeah, right.
Oh, they hit the lamp, bang, and these bugs
And
were
the water,
special,
the
though.
juice blows the bulb.
Blowing all the bulbs, see? But Luque had the Almendares Club. There was 3 newspapers in Cuba, the El País, the El Crisol, and El Mundo. And every night I would listen. Balota mañana por la noche, 8 y media. It means baseball tomorrow night at 8:30, no matter where I go on the street. So they asked me the next morning to come and be interviewed and have my picture taken in the El País, in the newspaper. I go into the building, there's no ceiling. It was bombed the night before. There was a truck outside of it. There's a church across the street. They blew the top of the building off. They bring me in to have a picture taken to put in the El País story. Here I'm sitting there, and the next, I said to the guy, what happened? He said, oh, don't worry about it. They just bombed the building last night, he said to me. And every place was Cuban police. See? Outside the bank, I saw a young fella, soldier, with a rifle, with a blanket over him. He got a little chilly at night, and he's sound asleep standing up. I looked at him twice. He was sound asleep guarding the bank outside. But I know Cuban very well.
Well, many years ago, I toured the whole Caribbean area with shows, and Cuba. I saw the gambling like I never saw in my life.
Oh, well, Meyer Lansky came there later, sure.
At the National Hotel Club.
Yep, on the Prado, the National Hotel.
And I saw these Argentine big millionaires on a throw of the wheel lose a whole hacienda.
Wow.
Well,
They used to play and the revolving stages they had there with the orchestras.
right. There was
Continually going
there was
on.
3 stages there,
Right.
3 levels
Right.
in the National.
It used to
That's how Batista.
be like a merry-go-round, you know.
So it was a real playland.
That's where
terrific.
that's the building that Batista took the country over. All the army officers were invited for dinner. He was
Right.
only a sergeant, see? So all the army officers went there for dinner. And when they were all in for the dinner, he went on the Prado. He went to the Moro Castle, to the dungeon there, the fort there. He got all the soldiers out. He put up all the machine guns. They're all inside the building. He took the country over. I remember that well.
That was someplace.
He was a real
We had a lot of
schemer.
fun down
Oh,
there.
yeah.
A lot of fun, yeah.
He was good for the working man, though. Yes.
Yeah, right. By the way, Tony, before I forget, we're going overtime now.
Yeah.
How much money are you paying us for this interview?
Are we
Well-
running over, Jan?
You got 10 minutes left.
Okay.
10
Well, we haven't got into films yet.
Well, we'll get
So
into
let's get down
film.
to this overtime.
We'll get into a little film.
How much?
All right.
How much money are we getting for this interview?
That's supposed to be the surprise.
Tony,
No, Johnny Carson pays us a certain amount.
Right.
But what are you paying?
Here we get minimum.
well, I saw Johnny Carson work for nothing
Right.
at the Caravan of Burma. And
By the way, the drink you had was $25. The meal you're gonna get is $170.
You're not supposed to be.
Transportation's
You're not.
$180.
You're only. You're only.
Well,
You
anyway,
owe me about $2,000.
Tony,
You're only a
Let's get
cameraman.
into
You're
the
not.
film.
You're only a cameraman. You're not supposed to be in this discussion.
Who?
You're only the cameraman here.
I know you're right.
yeah, but he's a producer.
Oh, he is?
He's the
the kinda
producer.
help
You're
you
talking
get.
to the
Well,
producer
then he's
here.
got to get paid too.
No, he's just floating in there.
Frank,
He's just,
you know, this is the kind of help you get today.
well, listen, back in the old film days,
Yeah.
there's so many interesting things we can talk
Oh,
about,
yes.
Tony.
Oh yeah. Listen,
and
I
you
got
have a man can do
I
it.
got into the business for the simple reason, I don't know why you fellas got in or how you got in,
By accident.
but I know I got in, I wanted to get in, and that was I wanted to see the world before I left it. Before I leave it. And that was the whole thing. That was my goal.
Well, we both idolized the director of photography, that's for sure.
Uh,
I couldn't believe it. 83 years old, he won the Hollywood Oscar.
he was 76 at that time.
When he won the Oscar.
76
He died at
years old.
93.
Right.
A month before he
91,
died,
91. I know. She lived to be 93. He
Oh,
lived
she
to be
lived to be
91.
a month before he died, he was at my home in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, we're talking about
And-
Eugene Schufter.
And I give him a bottle of wine, and his wife, we used to watch him like a baby. And when
Wow.
Eugene and I got together, I give him a bottle of wine.
Yeah, you see, that wasn't
He
right.
falls off the chair in the yard, and he said, "Am I shooting in Switzerland?" He said to me. He fell.
Now, you know, well, you see, that's why she used to watch, you know, because
Oh,
first of all,
yeah.
he wasn't supposed
Molly used to watch him.
to. Yeah,
he was
watched
such-
his weight, watched what
He was such a humble man. I saw him shoot a movie in 2 studios at one time, Bologna in Paris and St. Cloud studios. There was 3 cinemas on the marquees advertising his features. And before he shot The Hustler, before he won the Hollywood Oscar, he said to me, "Nobody's going to come see a pool room movie." We walked down 8th Avenue
Yeah,
together.
we laughed about that
Yeah.
because he didn't even understand.
He had no faith
Uh,
in the movie.
Yeah, well, you
See?
see, I told him, well, no, it wasn't that. It was, first of all, he couldn't see it as a film, you know. And I think winning the Oscar, that was in black and white. He got
Right.
the,
He was in Munich that night shooting Captain Sinbad for the King brothers in Hollywood.
yeah, right.
And that day, I was in the restaurant, in the studio, and the woman sitting next to me, Eugene said, "I want you to meet Heidi." I said, "Hello, Heidi." And we had these great big steins of beer there.
Uh-huh.
So I didn't know who Heidi was. She had a black wig on. I found out she was the #1 leading actress in Europe, Heidi Brudel.
Yeah,
She's a
you
blonde.
Yeah.
But Eugene was so humble, you know what I mean? I didn't know who the woman was.
Yeah, well, you see, when he would introduce you like to a woman, it would always be a man. I want you to meet the mannequin.
Right,
The
mannequin. Oh, yeah.
The mannequin.
Yeah, in Paris it means a model. That's always a
The
mannequin.
mannequin,
Yeah, I remember that too, yeah.
So he introduced you to the mannequin.
Right.
She was a top star.
And she was the top star. In fact, we both drank a big pitcher of beer together there. See, and then he asked me, would I go to Hollywood to pick up his Oscar, like I was going across the street. I said, I'm 3,000 miles away, Eugene. So he had the union, somebody there pick it up. Well, you have it today.
Yeah.
But he had somebody from the local pick it up. But he asked me, he thought I was going right back to New York. So I said, the thing is too late. And then I'm a week after the Oscars are given out. I'm there a week later, I told him. But he was a master, though.
Yeah, we were up in Toronto shooting a film called 10 Girls Ago. And it was my first,
I met him up in that studio.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Lee Garms was the DP, and he wanted Shuffy to, see that he wanted to use the blending of pictures, in some of the shots. Well, they just didn't have the equipment up there. And I went up on a freak on that job to make sure that the lenses wouldn't work. You see, they were shooting it in widescreen. And I happened to have a set and went up. And that's how I got stuck on the film, see. Yeah, they had Burt Lahr, Jan Miner, and they had quite a cast, young, old. And it was the usual, not enough money. Yeah, there was.
I've been through that too, Tony.
Yeah, and they had different ones on the set come on him, looking through the camera, and I'd say, Jesus Christ, there's so-and-so's wife. He says, yeah, they fly him up here, then they get him on a picture and so-and-so, And next thing I'm looking through, and that's a hell of a thing that, everybody gets in on the act. I'm looking through the camera, it's a park scene. Jesus, there's my wife pushing a baby carriage. They got her as an extra. So you see, you never know. You never know. Yeah.
Well, I saw them.
And that's how they, work it out so you get...
Unbelievable. We were out on location one day in Jersey, a harbor restaurant, all fired up, 3 cameras there, state police, newspaper, everybody there. Producer comes over to me and said, Frank, you ready? I said, I'm all set, the generator's fired up. He comes back to me with a long face and we have no film. I said, what? He said, nobody brought the film from New York. So well, give them a shoot it, let the cameras roll, give them a dry run. Nobody's going to know the difference but you.
Right.
I thought he was going to cry. We gave him a dry run, no film.
Yeah, no, that's happened.
I
They keep
can't-
everything cool.
I can't conceive how they can do things like that.
Well, very simple. And the producer says, Jesus Christ, lost it in the lab. Or
Too many people
they
involved, that's true. That's true, yeah. But they were the good old days, Tony. We
Yeah,
all worked
well.
together. We stuck together.
It was a
you
lot
know.
of fun, too.
It was, Frankie, that's true.
A lot of fun.
It was a different breed of people,
That's
you know.
right.
Yeah, and you knew what they were doing, though. You always had to improvise. You never lost a
Yeah,
show.
roll with the punch.
Never lost a show. You always got around it, and you worked it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But
right.
this is an age of machinery in the theater now.
That's
I look, when I first started, it was saltwater jars, dimming lights with electrodes and all in the early 30s. That's passe. Now I see like Cats, Twilight Express, Phantom of the Opera coming in.
Well, this
It's all machinery.
I call these spectaculars. I don't even call them shows anymore. They're spectaculars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we did them with the grand showcases, and I was out in World's Fair there with Billy Rose. We did all those big shows, but it was a different concept. But today, it's an intriguing aspect of the business now when you see $2 million spent on a projection to make bridges move back and forth and up and down and all that sort of. That wasn't the budget years ago. You had very little to work with.
Yeah, well,
You had to create. You had
They
to
design
invent.
everything. It's
You had to make it rain. You had to make it
Mechanical.
snow. You had to make all the effects.
Yeah.
Thunder and lightning. You name it, you had to create it.
The show had to be on the stage, too. Right now, you don't have a show anymore on the stage. What you got is spectacular. You got,
Right.
that's
Effects.
the difference.
Effects.
Effects.
Gimmicks.
Well,
That's why. How many hit songs have you had to Broadway shows today?
why aren't the writers around anymore? Did we lose your generation of music, Frank?
Well, there are no songs in it. There are very few. You got chorus line been running 7, 8 years. What is it? How many years been running now?
Yeah, quite a long time.
Around, I forget how many years. 11 years, I think. They have one song. You got what songs you got in Starlight Express? You got any songs?
No, the music is weak. The story is weak. The
There's
plot
plenty-
is weak.
There's plenty of
But
music.
the
Yeah.
gimmicks.
What songs has Sondheim
Fairy
got
show.
as a new show in the woods?
Yeah, that's a fairy story. You know,
What songs are standing? There's no. They make this. Today you sell an album of a score. You don't sell
Right.
any individual songs anymore. That's why I want to come back with my show, To Be Alive, because that's got individual songs.
Fellas, we
That's
got
different.
about 3 minutes left.
well, the day will come eventually. Maybe things go so low they need an uplift. Maybe things
well,
will
right.
revive itself, and things will
Today the
really,
shows at Broadway they become circuses. It's a circus.
We got 3 minutes, 2 minutes left.
All right.
fellas.
I can tell you one more little story about a girl called Dagmar.
Oh, Dagmar, sure.
Her name originally was Jenny Lewis. She came from Virginia. She used to shine shoes in front of the Shardy building.
Really?
We used to go down and get our shoes shined. She was a very pretty little girl of about 18 years old, 17 years old when we first met her. Schubert sort of liked the little girl. He said, let's dress her up and get her started in show business.
Right.
So we're doing a show with Jane Mansfield with Bert Law called Burlesque. And Jane Mansfield was leaving the show.
Ah,
And Schubert came to me, Frank, could you make a singer out of this girl? I said, well, I could try. Anyway, she couldn't sing at all, no matter what we did. I tried everything. It was impossible. But we sent her to Bert Law anyway. And because she was so robust, like you had Dolly Parton.
yeah,
today,
right. The Dagmar, I mean,
but she was a perfect foil for Bert Law. And she went in the show, and we changed her name to Dagmar. And from that, she went into television for
right.
many years.
Right, she had that night show with that
Right.
guy.
She's still alive. I think last time I saw her was many years ago at the the old Mayflower Hotel on
Oh, yeah.
59th, 60th Street in Broadway. Used to be a Central Park West. It was about quite a few years back when last time I saw her. But that was, I thought, a very little funny way it happened. I had a little girl coming in and going to a burglar, and they just used her for a foil, you know.
Yeah.
She
Well,
got-
Frank,
and-
let's hope that the two Franks and myself, after this talking, maybe we ought to.
They didn't tell us about your African
Well, we're going
safari.
to shoot it on film. That'll be to be continued. You see,
Right.
otherwise this way we won't be able to get back here. It's a wrap now.
Okay.
And when I get back again, then we'll talk about me a little bit
Wonderful.
and about
Wonderful.
the show.
Tony, we can spend a whole
Wonderful.
episode with you
Yeah.
here, just
You
talking about you.
know, on To Be Alive
Right,
and the film version.
right.
That you see, and Frank and yourself.
Good.
Maybe we'll all participate,
Right. And we'll get,
including the joint.
we'll get our new boy John in for
Right.
the act.
Right.
Okay,